Hello, my dear friends. Sorry, I'm not good at jokes. But this is a brand, right? It's a brand. Dima, for the ones who know the reference. It's Dima from the Military Summary channel, which I have interviewed on the podcast. I think I was the first one to reveal his face, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a brand. This is something I lack on this platform. I do things very randomly because my life is very random. Even my schedule is a bit random. But that was not the subject I wanted to talk about. But anyway, being on that topic, I hope you liked the video. Some brief comments on the Portuguese economy that I've done yesterday before going to work, and that kind of video, or let me put it this way, none of my videos intend to be like lessons, academic lessons, the truth, or they're just my view. Of course, they're based on information, which might seem obvious. They're based on information, but it's my interpretation of the information, right? So, and one of my goals doing that is to provoke discussion and to make people, write their comments and give their contribution on the channel to provoke a discussion, right? To provoke a reflection on the matters I talk about. I do not mind at all. That's not the point. For people to go there and write that they disagree and they put their own view. I think it's very interesting. It's a way for me to learn as well. And so that's how I do it. I'm not here trying to teach anyone a lesson. That's not the point at all. So we have Russia gaining momentum on a new front. The news has been on for some days, and of course the West is behaving like, sorry for the analogy, is behaving like the flies around a fresh turd, when they are disturbed. There's big fuss about it, right? And it's again a big fuss about the news of any move that Russia does. The first one is Russia is gaining momentum on the front again. The second is the new appointments to government made by Vladimir Putin upon his I don't know the number of his new mandate, the reshuffle of the cabinet. And the third is Russia and China expansion in Africa, which used to be Europe and United States, and more recently United States new backyard. In case of Europe, it's an old backyard. I've mentioned this news because of Portugal, if you remember, in the past two videos. In a very ridiculous interpretation that the Portuguese are doing of this, the Russians attacking the Portuguese interests, which are non-existent in African countries, now former Portuguese colonies. But anyway, at the front lines, unfortunately, is a war. Both sides lose men, but the losses have been disproportionate between Russia and Ukraine in favor of Russia. Ukraine is not keeping up with the pace, as it was to be expected since the beginning of the conflict. It did seem in the beginning that Ukraine was, and it still is, it's putting up a good fight, right? Because of course we know all the external help it has. It's only thanks to that, but it's still putting up a decent fight. But they have the wrong friends, I'm afraid, and it would never be a sustainable thing. And now we are seeing it because Russia is one body, one organization, and the West trying to. So it's a more well-oiled. It's a well-oiled machine, and more well-oiled. And the West trying to destroy Russia, because this is what it's all about, has actually strengthened Russia. Gave Russia all the motivations, and when I mean Russia in broad general, of course I mean the most powerful forces in Russia, like in every capitalist country, which Russia is one. You have the group of the so-called oligarchs, entrepreneurs if you are talking about the Western countries, the elites, the richest people. They were also censored and driven out of the Western economy, and this helped Russia. All the investments, all the external reliance on the Western countries that Russia has had to find other solutions for it. So it did find internal solutions for many things. It has boosted its industry, and it has increased, not just now, not just because of the war. It was already doing that before, but now it has augmented that effort. It has increased its influence network throughout the world. You know the story of isolated Russia? It never was. And if it was among some groups, it's less and less now. I think the ones who's being more and more isolated is Europe, for example, which was thrown into the arms of the United States more than before, and we can see that its reliance on the United States, it's against its interests. So Russia is actually becoming stronger, its economy is growing, its arms industry is being boosted, and it has several advantages that are also well known. For example, concerning expenditure on the military, they get much more for much less money, and they surpass the West in output of ammunition and several other things, military products. They surpass the West, and then also a relation which is very, very, very important, which is with China, has been heavily solidified also by the actions of the West. Because if the West didn't have any hostile, or at least if the hostile actions from the West, which were not only from 2022, they were already piling up sanctions way before, but if they have kept those old sanctions and did not become hysterical like they did in 2022, ordering like every company to get out of Russia in a clear attempt to demolish its economy. If the West had not done that, there would be no hostile relations between the West and Russia. Russia would not attack the West. For those who think it would, I'm sorry for you. I won't say anymore. Russia would not attack the West because Russia was benefiting also from the relations with the West. And Europe, of all the Western countries, European countries, namely Germany, we all know this, was hugely was having a huge benefit from the relations with Russia. Of course, the US does not like that. And so Russia went into this war with less strength, at least in manpower, than Ukraine, but it's been tuning up its war machine, it's been correcting his mistakes, and it's been putting up numbers, real numbers, on the battlefield. And I predict that they are still growing. This is not it. The offensive that we saw around Kharkov, in Kharkov Oblast, or Kharkiv, as you wish. In Kharkov Oblast, it's for now. I think the operation's intentions is to create a buffer zone because of all the attacks that were taking place from there into civilian areas inside Russia. Belgorod region was the most affected. So first, I'm sure the first objective was to create the buffer zone, but I think now they will expand the offensive, and Ukraine is in panic. It's acting like it. It's trying to scrape old and brush from every corner all the possible reserves it can, and it's actually thinning out other lines. The reason why the Kharkov offensive is being so successful is for the same reason that it's for the same behavior, because Ukraine had to scrape from all other fronts to the Donbass front, and I think and it thinned out, and this is revealed now because for example, I'll give you this example. The Russian soldiers entered through that in that particular area, and there were no fortifications, no minefields, no pre-prepared special defenses, and not many troops as well. But this time, unlike the first invasion in 2022, Russia is prepared. Russia is solidified. Russia has a lot of means to employ, and the future is not bright for Ukraine. And to help all this, you have the most decent declarations, because you know Ukraine have a lot of friends, a lot of sworn friends that we see crying for Ukraine. We have seen putting up flags everywhere, Ukrainian flags everywhere, treating Ukraine like the most noblest of the bloods ever existed, walking this earth, sacred Ukraine. And now Stoltenberg has said there is no point rebuilding Ukraine if Ukraine loses. If you have friends like that, I don't want to know your enemies, right? Yeah, Stoltenberg has stated this. And it has said this in a time of where Ukraine is under a huge military pressure. This is really, this is clear evidence of the kind of relation that the West has with Ukraine, and that none of this is about helping Ukraine or helping free Ukraine and maintain a free and democratic Ukraine, which is not. None of this is about that. This is just another evidence. Stoltenberg's words were not exactly those. I have to be sincere about that, but that's what he meant. I mean, he said, if I recall well, he said that there would be no point in rebuild a place which is destroyed when it's no longer free and democratic, something like this. So the main goal would be help it to prevail. You can go and search for this. You can find the paragraph very easily. And on the other hand, on the topic of African interests being attacked by Russia and China, and that somehow, remember some years ago, this China hysteria on Africa. Oh, the Chinese are giving predatory loans to African countries, leaving them imprisoning them in debt. This has been the hysteria. Now it's Russia's turn. Of course, Russia is not, it didn't go to Africa yesterday. And they have been there, as well as the Chinese. They have been there, behaving like the Westerners have not behaved. They went there on the basis of cooperation. If they take benefits from that, I mean, I'm not naive, neither you should be. Of course they take benefits from that, but it's a different kind of relations. And it's you can see that they are more benefits. They give more benefits to a lot of African nations, because these same African nations voluntarily tilt towards Russia, drift towards Russia. It's not random, they're not coerced. They see an alternative in Russia and China. And yeah, I mean, what do you prefer? A country that lies to you all the time, maintains you under the boot of some dictator, does not build your infrastructure, does not invest really in your country. The only investment that it does takes it out, because it all goes to his own companies. I mean, if you Western countries, typically what they go in Africa to do is to find diamonds, find oil, find rare materials, rare earth, and whatever. They take their Western companies with them, they invest there for these Western companies, and they leave nothing in the country. And then you have China, who goes there and builds thousands and thousands of kilometers of roads, builds port infrastructure. I mean, it's not much difficult to see this. And it's, for me, the hardest thing is to see the rhetoric on the news, looking at the expanding influence of China and Russia as a very negative thing. I mean, it's these people do not have a mirror. Why have we been doing there? Because most of the Western mentality towards Africa, it's still a colonialist mentality, and it's still the kind of mentality which sees those countries are hopeless. There will always be poor, there will always be the worst things and famines. I mean, they see them as the playground for non-NGOs, non-governmental organizations, for some upper middle class from Europe to go there and do some projects to feel good about themselves, but nothing very substantial, right? Countries to do charity but exploit at the same time. And Africa needs a different approach. It's time for the continent to develop to decent standards of living. And I'm not saying that everything is pink, everything was dark before and everything is pink and blue now. No, it's not. But it's a different approach. It's much more different than the hostile, predatory approach from the West, as I mentioned. So one shouldn't wonder that much, shouldn't be that much surprised that the phenomenon is taking place. I'm a little bit tired now, and I think I'll stop the video. This is what I was reflecting on, because this news have been pressing. The news of expanding influence, the news of the Russian offensive in the Kharkov region, and Oh, and I wanted, about this African influence, I wanted to give another example. That you remember the cereal crisis, the grain crisis, because of the Russian aggression on Ukraine and the blockading of the ports and and because now all the African countries would starve because of the Russian aggressions. Of course, the African countries were the ones that were seeing what was really happening. And nicely, some independent commentators like the Duran, like Alexandre Guerreiro, and many others have stated also, have pointed out the truth. But the main narrative was that the countries, these African countries, would starve because of Russian blockading the Ukrainian grain exports. None of that was truth. Mostly when the Ukraine was deblockaded, when the grain was deblockaded, most of the grain, when we checked the numbers, most of the grain was going to Europe and rich countries. So it was just another episode of utter hypocrisy. How many times this has to be repeated? I mean, it's a little bit too much. I don't know how far these people are willing to go with lying all the time, while degrading the interests of their own people, one must say. Okay guys, I think I'll see you on the next one.